What up, y'all? This is Patrick Hayes, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different. Today I am going to share a bit of my story with you, because I feel like, I'm always up here talking and telling you stuff and different ideas and different philosophies, but I haven't really expressed very much about my past or where I've come from or my story. And it's funny, when I start talking about my story, there's this really strong theme that has ran through most of my life, and it hasn't really kind of let up until the last few years. This is a theme of being a drug addict. And this is something I haven't really expressed very much before. I've mentioned it here or there. If you've read into my blogs and stuff, you probably know. But for a lot of you, you probably don't realize that I come from a background of heavy drug addiction. And it wasn't until about almost 7 years ago that I got clean and that it really turned my life around. But I feel like, I'm putting all these videos out about being motivated, being inspired, being grateful, living a positive life, being on your mission, so much motivation and inspirational speaking, that I feel like I need to humanize myself a little bit more in order for this message to really land. Because, if people hadn't really realized where I've come from or what I've been through, if they're in a depressed state or if they're a drug addict or they're feeling low, it might be hard to feel like it's valid, because they're like, well, he might have just been some privileged kid that travels the world and lives like some fantasy life. And while just being white in America does make me privileged, and I can't deny that, I have gone through measurable hardship regarding drug addiction and depression and growing up in a world that's no matter who you are, it's a tough world to live in. So I wanted to kind of give a bit more clarification and fill in a little bit of the background of where I've come from and what I've been through and why I'm inspired to be the person that I am today on the mission that I am today. I guess where I will start is, real quick, I was born in Washington, D.C. I moved a lot as a kid. I moved back and forth across the United States several times. I was always the new kid in school. I spent several years in elementary school in San Francisco. Spent several years in the Washington, D.C. area. I grew up as kind of like the typical indigo child, in the sense that I didn't understand the world. I had a really hard time getting along with people. I felt very depressed. I felt like I didn't fit in. I couldn't kind of find a place where I felt comfortable. I couldn't really express myself. I didn't have the vocabulary to express myself in a way that was articulate. So because of that, in many ways, I had a lot of emotional issues. I was extremely emotional. I had some traumatic stuff happen when I was a child. And then that mixed with the fact that I had a really hard time making friends in school. And due to my extremely emotional nature, I became a target pretty quickly to children for bullying, because they would get a big emotional response from me. It's hard for me to control my anger. So I had a lot of trouble with outbursts in school and getting suspended and getting expelled. And at an early age, I made a decision. Somehow inside my head, I had come to the conclusion that if I was a problem child or I acted out, that I'd be able to find other hoodlum kids that I could that would be my friends. And so I really kind of said, I'm going to go down this path. I started listening to gangster rap. I really resonated with the music because it came from this kind of especially like the Tupac thing was like, I'm from a hopeless lifestyle. And so it was like, I resonated with that because that's how I felt. And so I really kind of started embodying, those values and that mentality, and started hanging out with a bunch of hoodlum kids. I was stealing stuff and getting in fights and getting in trouble, and I didn't know what else to do. Started getting into drugs and alcohol. This is where the addiction started coming in. By the time I had gotten expelled from several schools, I was living in the Bay Area at this point. I got sent to a secondary school. So it was a school called County Community / Phoenix Academy, and there were basically two curriculums on one campus, where it was a school filled with a bunch of drug addicts and criminals. So I was like the only kid at the school that wasn't on probation and wasn't like a repeat juvenile hall attendee. The Phoenix Academy part of it was it was a treatment center also. So they would test you for drugs several times a week, and then you would go to psychotherapy and then have like group sessions with the other children and with the counselors. So it was really not your typical high school experience. My high school experience was it was strange. On one hand, I was getting a lot of insight from the psychotherapy. So it was just putting me in an environment where there was more introspection going on, paying attention to your feelings. I was encouraged to work the 12 steps. So that brought like the first introduction to spiritual practice into my life. Now I don't work the 12 steps today, but a lot of the key aspects from the 12 steps kind of became foundational pieces for my spiritual practice. And so I had that on one hand. Now on the other hand, it was an environment filled with a bunch of hoodlum kids. These are all the kids that got kicked out of other schools. So there were a lot of fights. There was a lot of kids getting, the police would come and arrest kids from school on a regular basis. There's a lot of drugs. There was a lot of gangster mentality, a lot of gangs. And so needless to say, it was a bit of a scary environment in many ways for me. But I learned to kind of get along through actually becoming a rapper. This is how I first learned to express myself. I felt very insecure when I was younger because I had so much trouble with kids and being able to express myself or feel like I was accepted. But there was one particular counselor at the school who, he was the only counselor that all the kids liked him. He was really cool. And his name was Latoris Brickley. And Latoris, he used to make used to make music. And so one day I brought my notebook in. I had been writing raps, and I started rapping some of my raps to Latoris. And Latoris totally inspired me and motivated me, and he gave me the confidence to express myself through hip hop music. And I started making music with him, and he would hype me up to the other kids, and all the other kids started really respecting me for my craft. And that was really my first ability, or the first time I was able to express myself. So, I always remember Latoris and thank him for that opportunity. But it was a weird dichotomy to live in this world, because, like I said, on one hand it was very introspective, and it started planting all these seeds that would grow to be to save me later on in life. Yet at the same time, it was planting all these other seeds of gangster mentality and just negativity, hopelessness. Now I was put on Adderall and Zoloft by the time I was about 13 years old. And Adderall and Zoloft, Adderall is like a high-powered amphetamine, and Zoloft is a mood stabilizer. Now, these two in combination made me kind of numb to my emotions on one hand, and then it made me much more conformist on the other hand with the Adderall. So I started being able to function in school. I was getting my work done. I wasn't having emotional outbursts because I was on these medications. But what this ended up doing is it really kind of set the platform for me to become a full-fledged, full-blown alcoholic and drug addict several years later. Because what it did was it made me, I was so over-emotional and unfunctional before. Once I started taking these prescription drugs to function, after about 5 years on those prescription drugs, I didn't know how to function without them. And when my body started rejecting them, it started rejecting the Adderall, I went off to engineering school. This is after I graduated high school. I needed to use the Adderall to function in school, but my body started rejecting it. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. So as a result, I started needing something else to function. If I'd stopped taking it, I'd have emotional outbursts and I couldn't focus, I couldn't concentrate. So I needed something, and this is when I started becoming more involved in prescription painkillers. So this is right around the time Oxycodone hit the streets. For anyone that's in the know about the opiate pandemic, they'll know that the Oxycodone, you know that time, and you know what it was and what it did. It was a really high-powered opiate, and it got me good. And from about age 19 to about 28, in my life as far as drugs, my drug addiction, it was a long and low spiral down to an extreme bottom where I ended up homeless and broke in Mexico, and I didn't get clean till I was able to go to an underground Ibogaine detox clinic in Mexico, where I eventually quit heroin. But in that meantime, between age 19 and 28, a lot happened. With the drug, my use of drugs, I was able to be somewhat functional. I was able to build a business. I had a property maintenance business where I could work very minimal and make a lot of money, and was able to pay for my drugs and explore a lot of different things. And while I was a drug addict, there were certain times that I really started kind of waking up in a lot of different ways. I started introducing myself to psychedelics around age 25, and a whole new group of people I started hanging out with that were more kind of like party creatives. They were like hardcore partiers, but hardcore creative people too. And I actually had about a year or so that I was generally clean from opiates, but was really heavy into psychedelics and then all sorts of other drugs. And in that time, I expanded my mind in a lot of ways. While I was still very energetically locked in negative habits and in drug addict lifestyle, I started expanding my mind to perceive of different possibilities. I started exploring a lot of fringe information on the internet. I started exploring a lot of sacred text, a lot of self-help stuff, and I started really building a foundation for myself so that fast forward to the time 28 when I was able to actually quit doing drugs, that I had some sort of psychological foundation to start implementing and healing my energetic body and healing some of these deep destructive energetic patterns that I had in myself. I had several awakening experiences during this time and towards the end and right when I was quitting, where I started to really move into a higher vibration. Now, the most important one, that was the one I'll speak of, was one that I had right when I was quitting heroin. Right after I had quit heroin and after I had done the Ibogaine detox, I had a like an awakening experience where the way I describe it now is a future version of myself came to me and psychically merged with me and showed me kind of what my ego, the ego chatter in my brain was, by giving me a visual representation of it, and then showed me my deeper truth and flooded my body with, or flooded my emotions with a higher vibrational energy, and then kind of gave me some very key thought forms to reprogram the way that I view and think of things. And it was a downright spiritual experience. People may call it a religious experience, spiritual experience, an awakening, whatever you want to call it. But this aspect of me came to me. It showed me a lot of different esoteric images. It gave me my name beyond form, which it showed a very specific sacred image that I have not seen since then, but it showed me the image and pronounced this very elaborate name at the same time, so the image and the name were all one thing. It was a very beautiful experience, and I've kept it close to me from this time forward, because in many ways what it was it showed me a preview of what I was capable of. After this aspect of myself kind of left, it was like, all right, now you've seen what you can do, now you have to do the work to do it. And it was right around that time that I made a decision that my duty on this planet is to do my absolute best, to give everything I can to be the best person that I can possibly be, and to share my gifts in the best way that I can possibly share them, and to do whatever I can to uplift humanity, to bring whatever gifts that are inherent in me forward to the people, so that I can make a positive change and create a beautiful ripple. And it was like in that time when I was coming to that realization, it was really kind of cradled in this whole appreciation for life, for being given a second chance. Because, I'd been through so much crazy stuff at that point in my life. I'd missed going to prison, like barely missed going to prison several times. I had almost overdosed countless times. I had a hard time even sleeping at night because my breathing would stop, so I'd wake up gasping for air. And that would happen all the time from the heroin. So it's like, by the time I even quit, I was so unhealthy that I couldn't even walk down a city street without stopping several times to catch my breath. I had pains all in my chest that were so bad from smoking so much heroin on foil. I did so much cocaine that I would have like splitting headaches, but then do more heroin to not feel the headaches, and do this for like months straight. So my body was in really, really bad shape. And the fact that I made it out, it was a miracle. It is a miracle. And in that whole realization, kind of coming to after the whole experience and realizing, listen, like I've made it through this, and I am grateful for being alive, and I can see the beauty in life now. It's like it is my job to share this. I have to share this with people, because there's, they say, the saying is like, however personal your story is, the more personal, the more universal it is. And I believe that. It's like, yeah, my story is really, to some people may be considered really tough. To other people it might be considered, hey, that's just average. But you know what? Like, it's a universal story. We've all gone through hardships. And, having been through it and being able to say I genuinely am inspired to live now. I genuinely am motivated, and I see the beauty in life. I'm no longer depressed or suicidal. I feel like it is my duty to share that. And I feel like I really needed to bring my story across, because I needed to bring more context to why I hold life so sacred, and also for the message to land more deeply, because there's other people that are living a life and they're feeling depressed, or they've been through dark drug addiction, or they've had a troubled past, and all they see is me speaking, inspiration, life's beautiful, smile, feel good. But they don't know where I've come from, or that I've actually had hardships, that I've actually been depressed, that I've wanted to commit suicide, that I've been a drug addict. Then I feel like, it maybe wouldn't land as well. So I feel like it's my duty, even though I feel like I'm being a bit vulnerable. For a long time I didn't even want to share this, because I didn't want people to see me in that light. I wanted to kind of uphold more of a enlightened persona. But I realized, I just got to be as real as possible, because the realness is where the beauty is. And so I have to share. And that's why I'm sharing this right now. Transformation is possible. And no matter who you are, you can find purpose in life. And life is beautiful. And so this is my message. And hopefully this brings more clarity. Hopefully this humanizes me more for people, so that you can relate to me more on a different level, so that you can feel more inspiration from the things that I'm saying. And so that you can respect yourself more and know that you can do whatever you choose to do if you really choose to do it. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is Patrick Hayes. One love to you, and I'll talk to you next time.